Step right up and join the most vibrant circus community in the world, circustalk.com. This is In Center Ring. I'm your host, Jonathan Lee Iverson. He's celebrated and renowned director, choreographer, writer, and producer of record-shattering extravaganzas the world over. From Salzburg to Tokyo, Broadway to Las Vegas to the Circus, he is an artist of immeasurable depth, range, and generosity. We welcome Philip William McKinley. Here, we're so happy to have with us the eminent, the dynamic, the wonderful Philip William McKinley. Are we going Philip William McKinley, or are we just going Phil McKinley? Are you doing the humble I'm Phil McKinley?
Whatever you prefer. don't call me late for dinner.
Yeah, well, see, I'm here to give you your shot on a podcast that you gave.
I appreciate that
shot in Circus. As everybody knows, you're the one who gave me my yellow brick road to the greatest show on earth. And I'll always be eternally great. I even came with my hat, my special.
I see that.
Gina Christiani, the dynamically talented Gina Christiani, made it for me just for this occasion.
Oh, fantastic! So you didn't take that from the Feld collection?
No way. I don't live dangerously.
That's right. That's exactly right.
It's really good to see you. I'm glad you
too
were able to stop by. And I mean, your career, it's so dynamic and illustrious. Reading your site is wonderful, you know, from Broadway to Salzburg to Tokyo to the big top. I mean, your career is really so dynamic and just wonderful. And I want to really hit on that quickly. You know, I mean, I can imagine creators, producers, what have you, budding creators, budding directors who have big ideas, who actually have this idea of what's the standard of making it in this business. You know, what is that? I mean, you've directed everything from dinner theaters to off Broadway to saving Broadway to, you know, big dynamic record-breaking extravaganzas. And obviously it takes a diversity of skill, imagination, to be able to exist in so many different platforms. Where does that come from for you?
I think it comes from never saying no. I really do believe that in a way that it's important that when opportunities come around, that you don't close those doors. And I think that's what I did. I didn't close the doors. I think there are a lot of directors and performers who have their sights set on doing one thing and one thing only, which was, you know, they want to be on Broadway. So they set their sights and they do everything they can to get there, or they want to do TV, or they want to do film. I never had a directive to myself about only doing one thing. I always was very open to what came my way, you know, which is what happened with the Circus. That was a total accident that happened with Tim Holst. You know, he had called my agent in New York and said they were looking for a director. And my agent said, well, I know the guy you should talk to, Phil McKinley. And he said, okay, great. But he said he's in Tokyo right now. I was directing, I think it was Hair in Tokyo. And so Tim said, well, we need somebody right now. So we need to find somebody. So they actually hired somebody else. And when I got back, my agent said, look, there's this guy, Tim Holst, that wants to talk to you in the future. And I said, okay, great. And about 2 weeks later, Tim called Brett Adams. Brett Adams was my agent, and said, hey, Brett, we've lost our first choice. And Brett said, oh, no, you haven't lost your first choice. You haven't seen your first choice.
I love it.
And that was great. And I met Tim on 42nd Street and 9th at a cafe, at a small diner. And he had this briefcase. He said, I want you to talk to Mr. Feld. And he pulled out this cell phone, which was like the size of, it was like 8 inches long and 3 inches wide, and, you know. And so I talked to Mr. Feld, and he said he wanted me to go see the 2 circuses. And so I went out and saw them that weekend, and then went back to meet him. And it all happened. And it probably happened because I grew up on a farm, in a farm area. So I was around a lot of animals. I had horses and we had cattle, we had buffalo. My father was a car dealer and used to bring home, he'd barter for stuff. And I remember one time he brought home a monkey, a spider monkey. And I had a spider monkey for a while. And we used to put on shows in the backyard with the monkey.
Wow.
So I know, so I grew up around animals. And the reason the guy who they first hired before me, he didn't realize that he'd have to be around animals. And he said he didn't like animals, he's afraid of them. So he ended up not doing it. So that was one reason. Thank God he did, because I had a great run there. I still keep in touch with the Felds, you know.
Absolutely.
But I love Circus.
Yeah. I mean, what was the initial thought, though? I mean, what was the initial thought when that opportunity presented itself? It was just,
well, you know, I was an assistant to George Abbott, who was like one of the fathers of American theater. Mr. Abbott, as most people know him, he was 100 years old at the time that I was assisting him. And I asked him, I said, how do you stay interested? You know, how do you keep doing it? And he said two things. He said, I never do anything twice the same way. And secondly, I do things that scare the hell out of me. And that was it. And I remembered that. So I look for things that are going to be scary, that are going to be, you know, challenging, because I think that's kind of when you do your best work. Same reason why I went and decided to do Spider-Man. It was scary. It was, you know, wow. Why not jump into the deep end?
Well, that makes sense. Well, when you're scared, it can ignite your imagination.
Exactly. So I think that's why my career has had the trajectory it's had. You know, I started off by teaching school in Henderson, Nevada, and a teacher there on the faculty dared me one day to audition for the show at the Lido at the Dunes Hotel. And I went and auditioned and I got it. So I left teaching and started worked in the Lido Debris at the Stardust. And then I moved about a year later to the Dunes and did the Dune show, the Casino de Paris, the all French review. And there wasn't a single French person in it.
Now, when you were teaching, were you like just teaching regular academics, or were you the music teacher? Or
I was music. I had the vocal and band, and I have to say to this day, I was a terrible band teacher. Terrible.
Oh,
I was a great vocal teacher, because that was more, you know, in my line of work, and I had majored in voice. And the year I went there to this junior high, when I started, there were like 48 kids in the music department. And about 3 weeks later, I had 152.
Wow.
I was young. I had hair down to my shoulders. I wore jeans and sandals. And it was an 82% Mormon school. The student body, 82% Mormon. So I'm sure this principal hired me just to shake things up. And so I promised these kids we'd go on field trips. And, you know, there were days where if I didn't feel like teaching, I'd say, let's go outside and we'll listen. I want you to listen to the sounds. And what music do you hear from just the sounds of nature? So if they went, oh, this guy's really cool. Used to call me Mr. Mac. And I love teaching. And that year, in fact, my students won the district vocal. They were great. I had a very, very unusual group of people, a group of students. And then I left that because I wanted to perform, I guess. And then the performance in Vegas led to, I also performed at the University of Las Vegas, UNLV, in their theater department. And two ladies there, Joan Snyder and Marion Stevens, they asked me to come on board. They were opening a new theater and they needed an education program. And they heard that I had an education degree, which I did. So I said, okay. And they said, we want to know, will you write a grant for us for the education program? And I said, well, okay. I mean, half of these things happened because I didn't know any better. And so I said, well, how much time do I have? And they said 3 days. I went, and it was for the National Endowment of the Arts. So I wrote this grant up, and we sent it in, and it was awarded. It was the largest grant awarded to the state of Nevada.
That's amazing.
It was great.
Of course, you never wrote a grant before, right?
I hadn't. So see, that's why those things are good, because when you don't know what you're doing, sometimes that's the best way to approach stuff. You know, that's the best way to go in. The same thing with the circus. You know, I didn't know any better when I started the circus, so I went to Baraboo and looked up all the old records and wanted to see what circus was like, and what, you know, I saw beautiful video of the circus in the 30s and the 20s when they were like unloading the train in Chicago. It was amazing. So when I went to winter quarters, I remember this so vividly. I started lining the animals up, and rather than having all the elephants together and like all the zebras together, I started doing 2x2s, you know, when we did the carousel. Boy, the trainers were so upset with me. We can't do that. We're not going to be able to do that. It's going to be ridiculous, you know. And I said, well, I don't understand. I said, I looked at the old records in Baraboo, and they used to do it all the time. So finally, I remember standing around, there were like 5 people around me, you know, all arguing, and Gunther walked up.
Great one.
And Gunther said, what's the problem? And I explained it to him that I wanted to do like 2x2s, you know, going from the smallest animal to the elephant. And he turned to the guys and he said, I think we should do what he wants. End of conversation. That was it. That was great. You know.
Of course, man. The great Gunther Gable Williams. Wow.
Man, you know.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, you have to tell me, you know, when did you get the director's bug? I mean, because the way it sounds, it's not necessarily something that, you know, I would know. I mean, of course, you put on shows in your childhood on the farm with animals and things like that. And it's something
I directed, I produced, I ran the ticket sales, I starred in them.
Well, so you already knew you were a showman.
Yeah. In fact, what is so weird, this is no lie, the neighbors next door had a barn that they used as their garage. And it had a dirt floor where you'd park the car. And then there was like a level, like a 12-inch step up. And there was like a platform where you stored like garden implements and, you know, your lawnmowers and that. I actually put on shows in the barn.
Wow.
And we hung curtains and, you know, had sheets that we took over. And I'd go in without my mother knowing and take the good sheets and put up curtains. And then she'd come to the show and go, wait a minute, those are my sheets. So,
well, did you charge?
We charged a nickel, and everybody got a free glass of lemonade with their, you know, I should have known I should have charged, you know, nothing to get in and 25 cents for the lemonade.
Right.
Because that's what we know. You make your profit in concessions, not in ticket sales, you know. But I had started in college. I was choreographing because I was a dancer. Okay. So I was doing some choreography there, started back in children's theater. And then when I got out of college, I was doing some directing, you know. In college you had to direct to get my degree. So I did a couple of directing projects there. I ended up directing because when I did the shows in Vegas, the Dune show particularly, I did 2 shows a night, 3 on Saturday, no day off, no vacation for 2.5 years.
Wow.
And in fact, I had all 4 wisdom teeth pulled and went in and did the show that night. So, you know, I was bound and determined. I passed out after the first number. They had to revive me. But I was there for the second number. They got me up in time. Let's go.
Smelling salt.
That's right. Let's go. Get him up. Get the costume change. Let's go. So because I didn't have an understudy at the time, you know. So I started directing because I think a couple of reasons. One, I really enjoyed watching actors that I had directed, you know, when the play was up. I really enjoyed watching them, you know, doing, you know, performing almost more than I enjoyed performing myself. There was something really rewarding about that. Look, And I'd lie if I didn't tell you there is a bit of control freak in me. So having control. When I moved to New York, I was performing. I was acting, and what gave me kind of a start there was I was an assistant to Robert Johansson, who was at Paper Mill Playhouse, and they gave me a chance to direct there. So that, and then what really launched it was Frank Young from Theater Under the Stars in Houston. He called me one day and said, Phil, if you want to become an independent director, I'll give you 18 months of work to start you out. And he did. Wow. And that's how I was able to go out and start directing independently. And the other thing was too, I tell this to anyone who wants to direct and is young, you need to take any opportunity to direct that you can. Dinner theaters, regional theaters are a great place to start, or you need to work with another director and develop your skills so that there's a couple of guys that have been my assistants that I have then later recommended that the theaters hire them to direct. And then they have to start building their career. And then just, again, I go back to, I just never said no,
Now, how did you handle the bumps in the road, the failures, the things when they didn't go they didn't go the way you intended them to go? How do you handle that on the journey?
The failures that I've had, if you want to call them that, have also been wonderful learning experiences. And I talk a lot with students, college students, about failing up, that you only fail down if you don't look at what you've learned from that experience and go, okay, I don't have to do that again. I can try something else. Zombie Prom was a disappointment because it didn't open. But at the time, the failing up was it got the largest cash advance of any off-Broadway show ever when Sam French got the rights to it. So there was a success there. And now I get checks from it all the time. Wow. So I can't call it a failure because high schools do it, colleges do it, everybody does that show. And meeting John Dempsey and Dana Rowe was great. I mean, I had a great time doing that. There have been things that may not have been financially successful, but I felt were artistically successful. So I think it's important to look at each experience and figure out what is the positive. What did you get from it? So I have to say, I don't think there have been disappointments. I wouldn't call them failure. I was disappointed that when Boy from Oz, that when Hugh we had Hugh for a year and that we couldn't go on with that show. We had other people interested in doing the lead, but unfortunately, the lead producer on that, Ben Gannon, lovely guy from Australia, he got very ill and got cancer. And so that engine, he was a driving force in that, and that hurt, and then we closed because we were successful. He was amazingly successful. The show, even though the critics didn't really care for the show, I mean, the audience loved it. And that's another thing I think for me. I've never been able to figure out how you direct for the critics. I don't know how you do that. I direct for the audience. I direct with things that I think, the audience is going to love this, and the audience is going to respond to it. I'm working on a piece now with Anna Devere Smith, a musical about Ella Fitzgerald.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We just did a reading of it in New York, and it's incredible. And she is phenomenal. Her research is just beyond anybody I've ever worked with.
She's absolutely brilliant.
And it's a great experience because Anna has never written a musical. So this is her first musical. So I'm ever grateful to have that and I'm learning a great deal from there. Opening up I always say open up new doors and windows. But I'm trying to really think, Jonathan, if I've had a failure where that I don't think I really have, and I don't mean that to be,
No, I get it, and I think this, you know, your attitude towards it, you know, I think that's probably what the answer is. I mean, I think we all have. It's just the ebbs and flows of life. This business, you're going to have those low moments. And I guess it's how you interpret it. You know, I think that's how you look at it.
Yeah, I think what's important, and has been important for my career as well, is that I never lost sight of the ability to dream. You know, you should always dream and keep your dream. Even when you fail, don't lose sight of the dream. The failure is only the means by which you get to the dream. Because if you fail, that's one more way you don't have to worry about ever doing again. Now think of a new way to do it, but keep your eye on the dream. That's what you got to do, always. Very early on, I talked to my agents and talked to my manager and said, I don't just want to work in New York. Mm-hmm. I want to work everywhere, because I love the experience of going into different cultures. And that's a huge learning experience. Like in Japan, I've done 5 shows there now, and I'm going back to do another revival of Boy from Oz there in June.
Wow.
Just being immersed in a different culture gives me an entirely different viewpoint and skills of how to deal with people. Because, you know, directing, so much of it is psychology. You know, you love the performance out of some performers. You demand the performance out of others. Some of them, you get out of the way and let them do their thing. And you have to figure that out. And the circus taught me a great deal about that because of working with all the different cultures.
Wow.
You know, you approach a Chinese acrobat far different than you approach a Russian acrobat. Very, very different culture, very different background. And you have to kind of know what those backgrounds are. You know, I remember very vividly making a huge mistake. Tim Holst, I remember him coming and saying, "What the hell did you do?" There was a contortionist on the unit. And I don't think she was Brazilian. I think she might have come from Mexico. And she had this great act. And so she was rehearsing, and her husband was the guy who gave her the props, you know, that handed her the different equipment she needed to do the contortion act with. And I was rehearsing with him, and I was telling her, I was saying, look, I think you should do this. And I think, you know, we should make this shorter. We should make this longer. And then I said, you know, and I said and I didn't know at the time it was her husband. And I said, well, can you bring the prop, you know, just being a little quicker to me and all this. Well, the next day, Tim Holst comes to me and said, what happened at your rehearsal? And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, she's gone. I said, what do you mean gone? He said, they left overnight. They packed up and left. And I said, well, I was working with her and I was telling her, and he went, oh my God. He said, you were telling her? He said, you should have been telling him. You should have been talking to him, not to her. And that relationship was that he was the dominant person that I should have been speaking with. And in that culture, the men, you know, you're kind of dehumanizing him. And I didn't mean to at all. So that became a real lesson of, that was a failure. Fail up on that one. So I think the other memory I have of the circus, which I love, is there was a Russian troupe, and none of them spoke English. And there was they had a son who I think was like 10, 11 years old. And of course, you know this, that when they put all those kids in the one-room schoolhouse on the unit, they all end up speaking each other's languages in about a week or two. And they become fluent. It's amazing. It's like, well, this kid, he knew English. So in order to work with the act, I'd have to tell him what I wanted, and then he would tell the act. Well, over the course of rehearsal, it was so funny because I got really upset with him one day. And I said, I had that thing, the chopping hand.
Yeah.
I was saying, you tell them I want them to get this and get it right. And they need to, do the trick with the music on this note. And I said, and you tell them exactly like that. Tell them what I said. Tell them my exact words. And he turned around, this 10, 11-year-old boy, and he went, in Russian, and he started imitating me. And I got laughing really hard. And his parents did too. But it was so interesting to watch that because during rehearsals, he was the leader of the troupe. Wow. And as soon as that rehearsal was over, he converted back to being a 10-year-old boy. It was fascinating to watch. It was great.
How did your time with Ringling Brothers inform your next steps to Spider-Man or to Ben-Hur, things that...
Ringling established me as a director who handles large spectacle performances. So Ringling led to Ben-Hur Live, where I did, the whole thing live at the O2 Dome in London, and had 5 chariots in a race, did all the stunts. So Ringling led to my work, I think, with Steve Wynn, where I did Showstoppers for him and also took over Le Rêve and redid Le Rêve for him. Ringling, so that established me, but this is a guy that can handle a very large, format. And I was grateful for that because I love doing that. The great thing is I'm working on a play right now too, really interesting play by a guy named Greg Hurwitz, who is the #1 international best-selling author in New York Times. And it's just 5 characters. So I love the contrast. I go off and do a show that maybe has 150 people in it, and then I do a one-woman show. I did a one-woman show 2 or 3 years ago that went to the Edinburgh Festival that was awarded one of the top 5 picks about Wallace Simpson. So I love the contrast. And fortunately, I have a manager, Angela Jane Kaplan, who really gets me and understands that you can't pigeonhole me. Because there were people in the past, everybody in the business wants to do that. They want to pigeonhole you. Oh, he directs dramas, or he directs musicals, or she, only does costumes, or she only does it. There are a lot of people out there that are multi-talented. And I've been fortunate to have my management team and my agent team realize that, and realize that I also now at this age, I like to go do things with people that I enjoy being around. Kansas City Starlight. I've directed more shows there now than the other director, more musicals. And they honored me recently, a couple of years ago, and they have a big museum and stuff. It was incredible. I thought, oh my God, I've gotten so old now. But I go back and I literally called them at one point and said, I really miss, working there in the summer. And they said, well, we can't afford you anymore. You're a Broadway director, blah, blah. I said, you don't know that. I said, you got to make me an offer, because I like their theater and I love the experience of, it's only 2 outdoor theaters left in the nation. Wow. So it's great. And I've done Wizard of Oz there, I think 4 or 5 times. And I had Munchkins. I had 120 Munchkins one year. It was great. All these little kids. It was great. Talk about a show. There's a show with kids, with dogs, with flying monkeys, flying witches. It gives you every heart attack you could possibly ever want. And you have pyro going off. But I like to do that now. I like to go back and people who gave me my start, I want to say, no, don't consider the fact that, oh, he's worked on Broadway and he's worked in Salzburg and he's too big now. I go because I love the work, you
Hmm.
know. So I'm getting ready to do that for a guy named Patrick Cassidy, who was Jack Cassidy and Shirley Jones's son. He's got a
Okay.
theater in Tennessee now. So same thing with him. He said, I can't afford you. I said, you don't know what you can afford. Make me an offer. So treat me well and I'll be there.
Well, I mean, and that's the beauty of it. I mean, that you really have a heart for making art, for making something beautiful, but more importantly, having that camaraderie with people. I mean, there's a
Right.
spirit there. I mean, because I think about that, I often, think about how you could go from this nice, quaint fireside dinner theater in Fort Atkins, Wisconsin,
Right.
to the glamour of Madison Square Garden, with the greatest show on earth, and I mean that we have an interesting relationship. How you took
Right.
me from that place in Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin, and I remember you whispering that to me, which is here's a full disclosure. Here's a surprise. How I kind of knew I had the role before I had it. You were like, I remember you said this when you said, I purposely have you here so you can get used to being in the round. Wink. And I went, oh, okay.
What's that mean?
I was like, oh, okay. I was just happy to have a gig. I was like, oh, because, my initial thing, I was just trying to raise money so I could go to Europe and continue with opera. And here's this beautiful opportunity came to join the greatest show on earth, which
Boy, did that change your life.
It did. Are you at the point where you even have to bother to look? I mean, everything is kind of.
I never stop looking because sometimes you have to, search for things you want to do, or you have to create the momentum behind something. I am fortunate that things do come to me, people, and especially if they're looking at doing something big, I'm one of the few names that comes up, but I like to do new work. I really like to do new work. Or I like to do something, if I'm going to do something that's a standard, if it's Oklahoma or, 42nd Street, I want to see if I can find a different take to do it now. So I'm fortunate that way. And I'm fortunate that, I still let people know I'm interested. I drop, it's very important. I tell young directors, drop postcards and don't send an email. Drop a handwritten card to people. It makes a huge difference that you write to them and take the time to write and say, hey, what's up? I'm sitting here in Palm Springs and it's hot. Get me out of here. Send me somewhere. So I try and stay in touch with those producers who I've had relationships with. Now I tend to, it's a little more difficult to leave home, but I still like to stay active. I'm not ready to hang it up yet. You
were close though. You were close at one point, and then what happened? Spider-Man.
I was very close. I'd had it. I'd left New York. I moved to Davenport, Iowa.
Right.
And said, I'm going to teach. I had a couple of offers to teach. I was going to teach. And I moved there. And lo and behold, they called and said, how would you like to do Spider-Man? And a lot of people in the business, they asked me, why did you do that? Whatever possessed you? Because who wanted to take that over? It had such a history, at the paper.
Yeah.
And to be honest, what happened is I got to see it and I thought, well, this would be challenging. But more than that, I thought, if this succeeds, I'm going to go back to Iowa. If this fails, I'm going to go back to Iowa. So my life wasn't going to change,
right?
And then when I saw it, the thing that I realized, there were like 300 people who were, if you count all the performers, the stage crew, the ushers, the box office, everyone. And I truly believed there was something there, and I truly believe it was a matter of saving those jobs.
Mm.
And that became, a dedication to me. And I'm real aware of that now, more so than ever. Same thing happened with Le Rêve. We had a really difficult night one night, really bad. And the cast was like, how could you stay? Why would you stay? And I said, because there are 200 or 300 of you that need a job. I'm not going to walk out on you.
Yeah.
Why would I do that? So with Spider-Man, I thought, I saw it and I thought, again, I was very honest with the producers. I said, I cannot in any way, shape, or form guarantee you good reviews because the critics have already decided. They've made the decision what it's going to be. And I said, I don't care if you brought in, Florence Ziegfeld and Michelangelo do the sets from heaven, and God himself was the producer, that the critics had made up their mind. I said, but I think I know the way to make this become successful for the audience. And it was. I mean, people don't remember that thing ran for another 2.5 years.
That's right. That's right.
And had we been able to knock down the weekly nut of what it cost to run it, I think it would still probably be running. But it was a very, very expensive show to run.
Very ambitious.
But I'll tell you my best reward from doing that show. I walked out in the lobby one night after the show, and we had these confetti cannons, the streamer cannons,
right?
Which to this day, the cast and the stage managers were like, oh God, we're going to bring in Circus. Oh God, we're going to shoot confetti. They were really like looking down their noses.
Right.
People went nuts. You know how that happened. You shoot that and people, they feel part of it. It was like webbing. So these two boys were out in the lobby on this big staircase, and they gathered up this webbing and they were throwing it at each other like Spider-Man capture. And they were having the best time. And finally, this one boy, he stopped and he said, wait, I have to tell you something, to this friend of his. And he said, wasn't this just the best Broadway show ever? And that was it.
Wow.
That these two young boys had just seen a Broadway show. And I thought, those guys will come back to Broadway. They'll come back to shows, So for me, that was the reward.
That's wonderful. Now, you recently did work with Big Apple Circus.
I did.
The great Nick Walinda. And we all were pulling for that show. And I mean, we're all up against this pandemic monster. My show, Omnium, we ran into similar circumstances, but we know about that. But I'd love for you to just kind of walk us through just getting back in the ring again and building that beautiful show.
I had been asked to do Big Apple 2 other times. And for various reasons, it didn't happen. And as far back as when Paul Binder was there. Mm. And so again, you never know. The guy who was a producer on Spider-Man is one of the producers with Nick on Big Apple. And he called me in like January and he said, I'm thinking of doing the Big Apple. Would you do it? Would you direct it? I said, absolutely. Because it was the one I hadn't done. I'd always wanted to do Big Apple because I love one ring European style circuit. Love that. So, and he said, well, Nick Walinda is going to be involved. And I said, great. He obviously has an amazing reputation in the circus. And then another guy named Arnie Granite. So we started. And then I'll tell you, I heard in January. And then once in a while, Michael would call and say, I think we're going to do it. We're trying to get the rights. We're trying to buy it. And then it wasn't until May or June when they said, okay, we're going to do it. And I went, whoa, wait a minute. 3 months. So we put it together. And luckily, Nick and I both were able to reach out to circus people we knew. So there were no auditions. It was just, we were looking on video and what they'd done or people we known, like Diana Vedashinka with her dachshunds. I knew her. God, I love those damn dachshunds. And we found these incredible acts all over the world.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of them were, some of them were people that Nick knew, some were people I knew, and then there were people brand new that we saw a video and went, wow, this is a great act. What I like about Big Apple are twofold. The closeness, that it's so intimate. And also what I did this year is we did video. And we interviewed all the performers. Mm-hmm. And during the show, there was video where the performers talked about their background, their history. And I loved that because, you know, I met all these circus people and they have these fascinating background and the audience never knew it. So this is the way I went, wait a minute. So when you're changing the set or, you know, before their act, even after or in the middle of it, there were these videos that they talked about their background, talked about their families, and the audience loved it because they got to know they're human beings, that, you know, like you and you know, you and me, but they do these extraordinary things. And the theme was making the impossible possible. And, you know, that came out of my years at Ringling, where I used to say, circus people dream the impossible and make it possible. And so that kind of became the theme, and we kind of moved everything toward that. But, and there was a storyline, which you really can't do in the arena, really, really tough in a three ring or for a large arena to tell a story. You could in the one ring because it's a closer, you know, more intimate environment. So there was a bit of a story too. So that was fun, you know, to take a different approach to it. What I did do, and I'm glad I did, I made sure that you could pull any act out of the running order and do the show.
Wow.
Because of COVID. And I knew, I'm going to plan for this. We had 23 versions of that show.
Wow.
By the time we closed this past Sunday, they had done the show in 23 versions because of COVID, of taking acts out or, you know, having to move things around. So I will remember that in my future, because you know how it is. If an act is out, sometimes you have to shift, you know, 4 or 5 things around. We didn't have to do that, which was great.
I think the one way I can describe you as a director is you're all heart. And obviously, no, but you know, I know
there are a lot of people that disagree with you about that.
No, but I really believe it. I mean, listen, you have the same manic craziness we all do as artists, but the brilliance is there. It's obvious, but more importantly, the humanity is there. And I've heard that across the board, whether it's our Fireside Friends, Fireside Dinner Theater, that wonderful theater, or it's the Big Top. They also, it's like, you know, he's in the trenches with us. And the fact that you're constantly thinking of the what ifs, something like that. I hope directors, creatives listening in on this really take notes on that. I mean, we have to adjust now. It's a brave new world. Right. We have to create shows a lot differently. And for you to actually think ahead and go, we have to have different versions. So what the audience is getting isn't compromise. You know, you don't come in with the show limping.
The thing that was great for me is when I would hear an act's going to be out, because the arc of the show, you know, how the highs and lows. What I was so grateful for is Georgia would do the nightly report, and I'd always look to see, was there a standing ovation? Because a lot of time there were a couple of acts that got ovations in the middle of the show, which, as you know, in circus is really difficult. Yeah. Alan Silva, who was there, who was our ringmaster and also did the aerial act, he would get a lot of times to get a standing ovation after his act.
He's wonderful.
He's great. He's great. I got to find something else for him, because what I like about Alan is that he's not only a great circus performer, he's a good actor. And I'm trying to think what we can do. I'm trying to, you know, So there's an example of when you say, do I look for things? I look for things because I meet people and I go, oh, that guy's really interesting. What could we do with that person? You know? So that's kind of my thing.
Now,
In fact, you just gave me an idea. I just thought of something. Man, I just thought of it just now. Anyway.
Well, speaking of which, do you have your creative or your rituals? Like, what would be your creative rituals that are, that you stick to?
I do make sure I go in and work in the office every day. I like to read new work. If that doesn't happen every day. But I do make it a habit of looking at all the emails, answering emails myself. I take my own calls. I don't have an assistant that takes my calls and schedules them for me. I wish I did sometimes, but I like to talk to the people. I get really bugged by people who only want to communicate by email or text. I hate that. I tell people I'm a telephone guy. Use that wonderful invention that Alexander Graham Bell invented that we're still using. I want to hear their voice because I need to hear their vocal inflection, and I need to hear their intent, because I think a lot of times in emails and texts you misunderstand what they're saying.
Right.
And so, but as far as real rituals, I used to, I think that's changed over the years. I used to block out everything in my head, even on paper, rather, especially like as a circus. We would do that white model meeting where I would know from beginning to end what was going to happen in that show. And I had great stage managers and assistants, like Wendy and Eileen Haggerty and those people who wrote everything down. And I felt because the piece was so large, I had to know what was going on. Because in a lot of ways, staging those big spectacles is a lot of mathematics. You're using math all the time. You have 70 people and you've got a certain amount of space. How do they have to be spaced out? How many go in the ring? How many go on the track? How many go in between the ring? And you really work in mathematics a great deal of the time to create pictures. So, and as I've gotten older, and I used to block out every show I ever did on paper. I would block the entire show before I went there, especially like in Kansas City when I was doing A Wizard of Oz. If I had 120 kids, I really would go in and block everything out. So I knew, and I had kids that came in from stage right and left stage right. Kids came from left and left stage left. So they were never crossing over. And if they crossed over during the number, they crossed back so that the wranglers were on that side of the stage and didn't have to run around. Now that I learned from Don Arden, from doing the Lido de Paris, because I watched him, how he did that. So that was a ritual that I really used to block everything out. I don't do it as much anymore because I go into the room and inevitably whatever I've put on paper changes because I see something in a performer and I go, oh, wait a minute. That performer is going to make the whole scene adjust a different way. That person moves a different way. So to block out every show, I'll instantly change it. And then once you change 2 pages of it, it's all going to change. It's all going to adjust. Right. So, but that comes from the experience of being able to think on your feet and being able to just know, having done it for so long. I'm fortunate, knock on wood, that I can come up with that stuff relatively quickly. So I do spend a lot of time, like I'm working on this Ella Fitzgerald piece right now. I do find I spend a lot of time listening to her music, and I try and make it. It's not like I go to the office and spend 5 hours listening to her music. I try and have it on in the house, so it's surrounding me, because every once in a while I'll hear something that she doesn't go, oh, wait a minute, let me hear. I need to hear that piece again because maybe that's something we can use. So if those could be considered rituals, that would be a ritual. But I mean, my only real ritual is I wear black.
Yes, I know. Yes, I remember that one. I was like, I don't get it. You always wear black.
Always.
It's easier for the laundry, you said.
That's right. That's right. Because when you go out on the road, everything goes in with everything. You don't have to worry about it, you know? So, and it makes it easier. I can live out of a carry-on for about 3 weeks. So
As long as it's clean.
that's right. You know, buy those shirts that you can rinse out. I used to remember Gunther used to tell me this. It's so funny. Gunther used to say that he'd just jump in the shower with his clothes on. That's how he'd clean them, and then he'd hang them up. You know,
I can believe that because he was always on the go. Always.
Always. Yeah, I mean that was probably that was a stroke of luck that I happened to go to Ringling when Gunther was still there.
Yeah.
Because man, he more times than not, ideas that I had, he said, well, let me try it. You know, shooting those sparklers off with elephants.
Right.
That hadn't been done. And yeah, Gunther was the one that said, we're going to try it. We'll try and make it work.
Wow.
And, you know, I remember the first time we did that, the elephants were lined up at the portal and we had the stabs clear down at the other end. And we went, okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. And they blew them off. And those elephants were like, it's like,
oh, wow.
Like, what the heck? And eventually they got used to it, you know?
Yeah.
So he taught me a great deal about how to work with animals, tricks of the trade.
Always in a job.
Oh, I do. Oh, I'll tell you another one I love. Hi. This was about, I was doing Ben-Hur Live.
Okay.
And in one scene, we had a vulture. And the vulture, when the scene opened, just flew off this rock and flew to the back door and then flew out the back door. And we were doing the scene with the vulture. And it actually was supposed to fly around the arena once and then out the back door. So we get to this show and we get to the vulture and the lights come up and the vulture takes off and just boom, lands on the ground and then waddles out of the arena, goes walking out of the arena like, wait it. And I went to the trainer and I was like, what's happening? He goes, I don't know. I went, okay, well, let's see what happens. So we'll try it again. Next night, same thing. Boom. And I go, what? I said, what are you doing? I said, okay, hold on a minute. I said, what did you do different? He said, I didn't do anything different. I did the same thing. He said, only thing was, I fed the vulture before the show. And I went, you what? He fed the vulture right before the show. And the thing was so full, it couldn't fly. And it would just like land on the ground. Now, fast forward to Spider-Man. Get this. So we had these things with the guy, the Spider-Man would fly around the room. And every once in a while, they would end up tripping the automatic shutdown because the way they did it is that the flight was so wide and you had a certain amount of space that if they went outside that, all the automation shut down because they could have run into a wall or whatever. So this kept happening. And I finally went to this kid that it kept happening to, and I said, okay, tell me something. What did you eat? What did you eat tonight? He said, well, I went out and I had steak and I had, roast. I had this whole film. And I said, all right, what did you have last night? He said, oh, I didn't have time to eat. I went out and had a thing of sushi. I went, that's it. You can't eat a big meal. And that was it.
Wow.
That extra weight was making the trajectory go out. So he had to like change his eating habits and we had to change the automatic stops on it. But I learned that from a vulture. I learned that from a circus, a vulture and Ben-Hur Live.
Well, here's the $1 million question. Which is easier to work with, the 4-legged or 2-legged mammals?
Ooh, you know the answer to that. Oh my gosh. Those 4-legged don't talk back.
They're a
And
lot
they don't have to learn lines.
right. Oh, this was so much fun. This was so much
good.
Fun.
Me too.
I'm with the great one. You're the great one now.
Is that right?
You're the great one now.
Oh, be careful. Great one what? That's the question.
Well, let me give it to you, man. I got to give you the great announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, he is the one, the only Phil McKinley. Thanks for stopping by in Centering.
My pleasure. Anytime. Thank you.
The Circus Voices 2022 spring season is a co-production between Circus Talk and In Centering. Join Circus Talk today and find the talent or the job you've been looking for on the circus industry's international casting marketplace. We have a special offer for Circus Voices listeners. Receive 15% off your annual membership by using the code Circus Voices 2022. The circus is a vast international community, and there's only one place to connect for jobs, events, the latest news, and so much more. CircusTalk.com. Join today.